This past week, the MLB trade deadline went and passed, and there wasn't much that happened here. Definitely not as many blockbusters that we thought would have happened, but nonetheless, there's still some interesting trades teams to talk about here. So I'm going to break it down, just give you some, in general, winners and losers of the trade deadline. So my first winner, and I think this is the overall consensus winner, no matter who you ask, the San Diego Padres. They had a very good deadline. They got Mike Clevenger from the Cleveland Indians. Really bolsters what they already have in a solid rotation. That adds a true number one star ace to this rotation. Even on top of guys like Chris Paddock and Zach Davies, they now get another guy in Mike Clevenger. The only guys they gave up for this trade are Cal Quantrill, who is a pitcher, Josh Naylor, who's an outfielder, and Austin Hedges is a catcher there, and a couple of prospects, which really, when you're asking for one of the best pitchers in the league, that is not too much to ask for, especially starting pitching, which is so valued nowadays in the MLB. They also added Trevor Rosenthal to an already great bullpen that has guys such as Kirby Yates and Drew Pomeranz. And they also added some depth at first base and catcher, adding guys such as Mitch Moreland from Boston, Austin Nola from Seattle, and Jason Castro from the Angels, which the latter two are the catchers there. And as I said before, they still have a loaded farm system. They only gave up number 5, 7, 9, and 11 in terms of the ranks in their farm system, and two other quality prospects in Jessen Rosario, and Hudson Potts. So this is a team who, at the deadline, said, look, we've done everything right up until this point. We had the slow rebuild. We signed some splashy free agents in the offseason. Now let's go out, get those final pieces to try to make a run at this thing when it comes October. So good job on the Padres. They got a lot good done in this trade deadline window, so very good for them. Next winner is the Oakland A's. So they got two solid players, of one of which is slumping this year. So they sort of have these buy low, sort of low risk, high reward moves that they did. So first off, they got Tommy La Stella from the Angels. This is a very good pickup. He is such a good hitter. This dude never strikes out. So if you want to hear something crazy, especially for today's MLB, where it seems that all guys do is strike out and hit home runs, Tommy La Stella, up to me writing this, has had 117 plate appearances this year. He's only struck out 7 times. That is easily the best mark in the MLB in terms of strikeout percentage. The guy never strikes out. It's actually crazy. They also acquired Mike Minor, starting pitcher from the Rangers, who even on a down year this year, he's had a 5.60 ERA, whip of 1.35. That's still a boost to the rotation, especially if he can get back to his form, which he's had in the past. And they only gave up Franklin Barreto, cash, and future considerations for both of these players, who will some way or another factor into their plans to go after the pennant this year. So really, as I said before, they really gave up peanuts in comparison to what they get back in a player such as Tommy La Stella and Mike Minor, if he will live up to his potential. That's the main question with that. So then my final winner is the Toronto Blue Jays. This is a team on the rise who focused on improving some key spots in their lineup. So they got a lot of starting pitching here, including Robbie Ray from the Diamondbacks. They also got Taijuan Walker from the Mariners, and also taking a super deep rotation in the Dodgers, taking Ross Stripling away from them, who really just need to stay healthy for the Blue Jays, as they've sort of been hit with the injury bug in this spot. They also got Jonathan Villar from the Marlins. He's got a slash line of 272, 328, and 360 so far this year. Having a pretty solid go of it. Really gives them a great switch hitting utility player. Can play most of the infield and some outfield as well. And they did this by basically only giving up cash and some players to be named later, who are most likely some prospects. But like the Oakland A's, I think that this is a pretty buy low, low risk, sort of high reward moves that they have going on for them. and this is solid. So they're adding on to what is already a solid young core, and very good for the Blue Jays. They remind me a lot of the Padres right now, or from a couple years ago with the Padres, how they were just loading up on their farm system, and it seems like now they're sort of starting to click everything into place. Sorry, big truck going by. And with the exception that they also haven't made any sort of splash signings in the offseason. Besides Hyun-Jin Ryu, I would consider their only splash signing in the offseason. But even then, I think that anytime you sign a starting pitcher, it's more of like less of a flashy move, if you will. Once you start signing position players to big money like Eric Hosmer and Manny Machado, those types of moves, that to me is considered like a splash move. So good move for the Blue Jays. It seems like they're really heading in the right direction organization-wise. So very good for them. Now let's go into the losers side of things. So the first one we got to talk about is the Cleveland Indians. The main reason they're here is they gave up Mike Clevenger for a whole lot of nothing, honestly. And while they did get a decent haul of prospects overall, none of them are projected to be stars, if you will. So when you're trading a guy like Mike Clevenger, when you're trading anyone really, you want to make sure that you get a return on your investment. So basically, when you're trading away a guy like Mike Clevenger, you have to say to yourself, okay, we know Mike Clevenger is a top 10, top 15 pitcher in the MLB right now. So we have to make sure that whatever we get back for him will be a return on our investment in this player. So they're saying to other teams, look, we're going to give you this guy. You need to give us something in return that will eventually equal, if not be better than Mike Clevenger. And with the guys they got in this deal, they really didn't make a dent, honestly, and especially in a loaded Padres farm system that can definitely afford to throw a few guys away. Not really throw a few guys away, that's the wrong term there, but they have a deep enough farm system where they could have taken some really high level, high caliber prospects from the Padres for one of the best pitchers in the league. But I do understand why he was traded the way he was. So if you did not hear, him and Zach Plesac broke team protocol. They went out when they weren't supposed to, and I'm not sure if either of them tested positive, but they broke team protocol, went out. The entire team was furious at them. They were very mad, and I think the Indians looked at this and were like, we can't have these distractions in the locker room. We just got to get these guys away as soon as possible. We'll take whatever we can get from Mike Clevenger, even though we'll still try to get the best that we can. So they did make the smart move, I believe, by getting rid of him for the organization as a whole. But what they got back in return for him, I do not think was enough. And I think that ever since the moment that they broke that protocol, that's when they should have been looking to trade Mike Clevenger. Because then I think they would have had more time to sort of feel the market, feel what they could get for him. And I think that's the reason you saw them get so little in return for such a guy like Mike Clevenger. I think last minute, they really realized the resentment that he had throughout the locker room, in the clubhouse, and how he really wasn't on his teammates' side anymore. And so, I mean, I hope it works out for the Cleveland Indians in the future, giving up Mike Clevenger like this for what little prospects they got. I hope they work out for him, but as of now, they have to go in my losers category. Also a loser in my mind is the Texas Rangers. The main reason is that they had a lot of pieces they could have traded away to build for their future, one in particular, and they just didn't pull the trigger. So Mike Minor is gone, and he was struggling, so it makes sense that he was traded away, but a 32-year-old Lance Lynn is still here, who was 1 year older, mind you, than Mike Minor. Actually, I believe he is 33, and Mike Minor is 32. And he's a major player on the market. He's a very good pitcher, and they could have had plenty of teams that would have been willing to shell out some prospects for him, as well as Joey Gallo, if they wanted to go that route and trade him away and get some really good pieces in return for him. Over the last couple of years, he's sort of figured out how to stop. He figured out that besides hitting home runs, you can also get, singles, doubles, things of that nature. You don't have to either hit a home run or strike out every time. Joey Gallo figured that out. But I do understand why he's still here. He's young, 26 years old. So he could potentially be with this team later down the line when they decide that they're ready to compete again. But my main issue is that Lance Lynn is still here when they could have gotten a huge haul for him. Especially when he's older than Minor, and they still justified trading Mike Minor away when he was regressing. When he has had not such a hot year. They traded him low. Lance Lynn is still putting up good numbers, so I don't understand why you wouldn't, try to trade him away. Then your team gets to tank a little more, which, for the record, they're 13-24 so far this year, something like that. So they're not exactly competing for their division. So I think it only benefits you to get rid of Lance Lynn now when he's doing so well and sort of wasting innings at the Texas Rangers. So they have to go in the next loser spot. Now, my last loser hits home with me, as you could tell from the shirt. Very cool shirt, by the way. Got it at a game. Anyway, Milwaukee Brewers. So this season has sort of been, I guess what you would call a loss for the Milwaukee Brewers. They had this really big overhaul, got rid of Yasmani Grandal and Mike Moustakas, and they brought in a bunch of new players, basically had a big facelift. And this just hasn't worked out for them. They've got offensively the second worst average at 214, and they've got the fifth worst OPS at 683. They're just doing terribly on offense this year. And even with them doing very bad on offense, they're still 17-19, and very much so in the playoff race with this expanded playoff spots this year, as 8 teams will now get in from the AL and the NL. So who did they go and get during the deadline to, get some better bats? As you can see, the numbers speak for themselves. They're doing very poorly on offense. And trust me, watching a Brewers game, very hard to do nowadays, at least on the offensive side, because it seems like we get shut out by everyone nowadays. So here's what I think they could have done. They could have gone after someone from the Tigers who would be a cheap rental, such as bringing in Jonathan Scope again, who's had a good year. CJ Cron, La Tortuga's also had a very good year for them. Maybe go after Starling Marte, get a little more competition in the outfield side of things. He's been very solid on the bat this year. Maybe bring back Jonathan Villar from Miami, who's another team who you can maybe throw a prospect or two at them in return for Jonathan Villar, who you get for a year. So did they do anything like this? Nope. Nothing like this of any sort of nature. Instead, the Brewers sort of sat and twiddled their thumbs, honestly, which I find very odd considering that they've been pretty ambitious at the past couple of deadlines. 2 years ago, or 3 years ago now? Wow, time is flown by very fast. Whenever it was, Mike Moustakas came over in that big trade with the Royals. They also traded Christian Yelich in the offseason, traded for him. That's obviously worked very well for them. So I just don't understand why you wouldn't try to go out and get another bat for this team who is struggling dearly at the position. I guess the only reason that I could think of as to why they wouldn't be willing to trade away anything is because they don't have anything to trade away. So their farm system is really bad right now. They don't have a single top 100 prospect. Now that they've got guys such as Keston Hero and Orlando Arcia who have sort of graduated. So I don't know. As a Brewers fan, it seems like the team is sort of stuck in limbo right now. We're sort of competing this year, but at the same time, it's looking really rough offensively. And then for prospects, we don't really have that marquee, number one guy who can come in here and help us out. So that's why I have the Brewers on my losers list. That wraps up my coverage of the trade deadline. Not a whole lot happened, but there were still some interesting moves to talk about.